So many of you know that I talk quite a bit about how childhood wounds and traumas, as well as adult traumas, affect our love life. And today I'm really excited to have a special guest on our show today, or my podcast, or whatever it's called, my video. And it's actually my coach. Her name is Sabrina Rising, and she has helped me work through some stuff that's going on in my life. And I wanted to chat with her today and see how she can help all of you that are that need some help with attracting the ideal relationship in your life. More importantly, the ideal relationship with yourself. So, Sabrina, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So do me a favor for our audience. Just give us the 30-second thumbnail of what you do.
Okay. Here's my entire offerings in 30 seconds. I'm an intuitive guide, and I have been facilitating transformational processes for people dealing with anxiety, depression, uncomfortable emotions, early childhood trauma for almost 2 decades now. And I teach mindfulness, meditation. I do a variety of different things in terms of, teaching abundance and manifesting. And essentially, I help people align with their innermost desires so that they can create a life that they love.
Yeah. Well, I know you're doing tremendous work for me. So I know that I'm doing this endorsement, not because you're just someone in this business. You're actually someone I work with. And you're helping me a lot in my own personal life. And to the extent I'm sharing this with my audience is originally I came to you because I was feeling some ease in my professional capacity. And what happened was an unexpected dive into my childhood, my relationship with my father, my relationship with my mother. And again, I came to you from a business sense, and all of a sudden I'm revisiting a lot of my childhood stuff.
That's always what happens.
Yeah. So can you talk about that? Because I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And yet I do now recognize the value of going into our past to kind of heal where we're at today. And you're welcome to use me in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, it's really important to understand, I think, for anyone who's on a healing journey, that we can't really deal with life at the level of circumstances, because the circumstances are always a reflection of what's going on for us on a much deeper level. In my work, especially in my level 1 program, we really focus on the subconscious and how the subconscious is programmed in early childhood between the ages of 0 to 6, when, we're all roughly in what's called theta wave brain state. And there is no filter present to not take on what is being, presented in our early childhood environments. We inherit the values of our caregivers. And so these values, are internalized, and we make decisions in this time about who we are, what we can have, what we can't have, our relationship to ourselves, our relationships to love, to money, to all of these areas of our lives. So we are conditioned in this childhood experience, and this is where our belief system is formed. And so we have to always go back to the belief system if we're going to create, sustainable transformation in any area of our lives, right? So, when you might have a struggle with your career and your finances, and, for me in my work, the context around that is, our relationship to the masculine, right? So we look at relationship to father, and, male caregivers, or male, influences that we've had in our lives, and how we've, developed our relationship to these influences. And that relationship is always what we're playing out in these areas that are predominantly masculine. Just like our relationship to our mothers is the dynamics that we're playing out in all areas that vibrate feminine, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, is it okay if I jump in?
Please.
So, and I want to share this with everybody is because when I came to you from a professional capacity, and you invited me to explore my relationship with my father's relationship with money, for example, and the fact that I had immigrant parents, and right off the bat, my father, I saw as a child, my father was uncomfortable in this world of United States, coming from Istanbul, Turkey. In addition, my father had a unique relationship with his professional life and money in particular. And I had no idea how this would actually bleed into how I view things as an adult. Okay, so that was my money piece. What was also fascinating for me, and to the extent that I was aware of this, with my mother, who kind of represents, if you will, the feminine, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
and how I relate to women. I had a mother who was emotionally closed off. I had a mother who would stonewall, and I find that as a little boy, as I explored this with you, as a little boy, I'm kind of reaching for mom to give me attention. Mom, give me attention, give me attention, give me attention. I wasn't getting, huh?
Yeah. That's what you become attracted to as an adult, is women that are emotionally unavailable or aloof, or, not available to you, because that's what you interpret as love, right? That's what you learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, to the extent that I recognize I'm what's known as an anxious attachment style, and then I tend to choose women who are more, some completely avoidant, some a little less avoidant, but it's that difference that I am on a subconscious level attracted to. And what I'm learning, even in my current relationship, is how to regulate my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about making my partner out to be wrong. It's really about me learning to regulating my own emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about something earlier, though, about avoidance, if you will, or people that are emotionally, whether they're constipated, emotionally unavailable, emotionally unskilled. I get a sense that that's a really significant percentage of the population. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's difficult to quantify because,
Okay.
there's so many different factors at play. I think that avoidant or anxious, whichever attachment style we're looking at,
Yeah.
these are both ways of coping, right? They're
Okay.
just both coping mechanisms. So an avoidant person is trying is avoiding the conflict. They're avoiding the closeness. They're avoiding the attachment because it makes them uncomfortable. An anxious person needs the closeness, needs the reassurance, needs the constant, presence, because they're
Validation.
the validation, yes,
Yeah.
because they are, they're insecure. So but we're dealing with fear in
Yeah.
both of these sort of operating systems. They're just different ways in which we learn to cope with fear, right? And I think that for people who are avoidant, they're uncomfortable with their feelings, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing: a lot of anxious attachment, style people, if we're going to use that label, are also
Yeah.
avoiding their feelings. They're maybe using other things to deal with their anxiety.
Mm.
Be drugs or alcohol or food or other types of ways in which they can find that instant relief, right? So in both of these scenarios, whether you're anxious or avoidant, my recommendation would be to learn how to sit with your discomfort.
Yeah.
This is something that we don't learn as children, right? We don't, because our parents haven't modeled it for us. Our parents don't necessarily pull us aside and say, okay, you're having these big feelings and it's really uncomfortable and it's going to pass, and I'm going to sit with you and I'll teach you how to breathe through it until you can, get to the other side of it, so that we learn, okay, big emotions are okay to have. And if I learn to sit through them, I can get through them, and learn to take personal responsibility for the quality of my state. Right. So this is the work we need to do, regardless of your attachment style, regardless of how you show up in relationships. Your patterning is your patterning, but it doesn't need to define your story. It doesn't need to define who you are, if you learn to do the inner work to deal with your discomfort.
You just said something. You mentioned story, and it makes me think of how I have a propensity to create stories in my head that validate a reason for me to either run or fight within the relationship. And as I said, I'm an anxious person. So, and by the way, I just on a complete side note, I'd like your take on this. I think anxious people tend to have more what I call martyr energy. Like, I'm the one fighting for this relationship and they're doing nothing, And so they tend to feel a sense of victimness because they appear that they're doing more work, when it's both people are struggling to really get close with one another. And it's because of our wounds that we don't find a way to do this. We tend to do more of this. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. And I really feel compelled to bring us back to a place of neutral observation, because we can't get caught up in all these definitions and labels and diagnosis, and when you declare that you're an anxious person, right, you keep creating that for yourself, right? And so I really want to
Oh,
create.
stop coaching me right now.
You
No,
should.
and I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Right? So, I think it's really important that we sort of honor, our unmet needs, right?
Yeah.
In whether you're avoidant or anxious, or whatever style you observe yourself to be, or others have observed you to be, it's really important that we see that at the root of this are unmet needs, right? So
Yeah.
now it's a conversation about how do I get my needs met? Right? I
Yeah.
have a need for reassurance, or I have a need for connection, or I have a need for autonomy, or I have a need for space. Whatever the needs are, in a healthy, loving partnership, or any relationship for that matter, there is space for everybody to be able to identify what their needs are, advocate for their needs, and then make requests to get support in terms of how to get those needs met, right? So if you're in a
So,
partnership, if you're in a partnership with as you just explained, you're more anxious and your partner's more avoidant. If you have a need for reassurance, you can, share that with your partner and ask her to support you in getting that need met. But there's two parts to this, right? So the first part is, how are you supporting yourself
yes.
in providing your own sense of reassurance, your own sense of self-love and self-worth, and so on, right? So we always have to look at like our own relationship to our worthiness, and our own relationship to love, and and taking care of ourselves. How are we nurturing ourselves? Are we taking those steps? And then we want to look at what's available in our relationship, because there's nothing wrong with asking your partner for support in certain areas, especially if we're feeling a little scared, a little weak, a little insecure, a little whatever the experience is. That's all fine. This idea that we need to come together as two holy, enlightened beings to manifest this, incredible utopian love is a beautiful idea. And, we also have to give ourselves room to be human, right? And so there needs to be space for that humanity in your relationship, as long as both people are committed to taking personal responsibility. Where we get into trouble is when we make our partner responsible for our feelings, right?
Yeah.
Or even just other people in general. Doesn't this have to be a significant other? It can be, a work associate, or even our children for that matter.
Yeah.
We can make our children responsible for our happiness, or our pain, and so forth. So it's really important to have this mechanism in place where we understand our conditioning. I understand that as a result of being my father's daughter, I have certain patterning as it relates to the masculine. And as a result of being my mother's daughter, I have certain patterning as it relates to the feminine. And now when I know I understand what these conditioned beliefs are, with awareness, I can make different choices for myself, and making those different choices is going to bring up anxiety. It's going to bring up resistance. It's going to bring up all kinds of uncomfortable emotions. And that's where all of these wonderful self-regulation tools we have, in inner work come into play, that allow me to learn how to presence myself. Right?
Yeah.
And that's
So something just occurs to me, and that is, oftentimes a lot of the people who follow my work going, "Oh God, Jonathan, you're so articulate. You're really good at expressing yourself and that sort of thing. I wish more men were like you. How do we clone you?" I'm sharing this because it wasn't until I did a tremendous amount of inner work could I actually identify what was going on inside of me, the voices in my head, if you will. I like the way Michael Singer talks about it in The Untethered Soul, the roommate in your head.
Yeah.
And I want to bring this to relationships in particular, is that I think one of the challenges most couples have is that and most individuals have, is they really don't know how to express what's going on, expressing their needs, as you just talked about, really even identifying their own feelings. At the Hoffman process, they do so many different exercises to get you to talk about your feelings. And every time I was sharing a feeling, they go, "No, that's just a thought."
Yeah.
A feeling is happiness, sadness, confusion, and so I think so often we as humans get so caught up in the thoughts, but we rarely actually get in. We're feeling our feelings, but we don't even know what we're actually feeling, or actually have to putting words to it. Am I making sense here?
Yeah. I think you're making absolute sense. It's even in my session work with clients, I ask people how they feel, and they'll tell me what they think, or they'll tell me why they're feeling what they're feeling, instead of just pointing out the feeling, right? And
Yeah.
so, and this is so important when we're using dialogue to resolve conflict in partnership, because we can get it caught up in the story again. I'm angry because of blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Or we attribute it to the reason or whatever happened versus just sitting in the experience, right? So
Yeah.
being disconnected from our emotions is not new. I mean, this is our society. It's how we've been raised, right? And when you
Yeah.
look at early childhood conditioning, part of what's happened in parenting, at least in previous generations, and I'm declaring that we're changing that, in for future generations,
Yeah.
is that, when a child is having a lot of big emotions, that can trigger a parent, and it can make a parent uncomfortable. And, as parents, we want our children to behave the way we need them to behave in order to make us comfortable. So
Yeah.
we learn to deny our experience, right? We don't learn how to put a voice to our emotions, how to
Yeah.
with them and say, I feel angry, or I feel scared, or I feel frustrated. We learn to suppress and betray ourselves because it makes us more pleasing to our environment, right? It makes us more, easy to approve of, or more well-behaved, or,
Yeah.
you often hear that, oh, your child is so well-behaved. Like, what does that mean? Right? Does that mean the child is completely suppressed? Right? And so we learn to be,
Could be.
but
It could be.
oftentimes it does, right? And so we
Yeah.
learn to suppress our emotions, and then we grow up, as adults, and we try to go into partnership and create intimacy and create meaningful connection. And we can't create meaningful connection unless we are connected to ourselves. And the first place that we want to look is getting connected to our feelings. So there's so many different things we can do to get in our bodies, right? We can meditate, we can do breath work, we can do, as you talked about Hoffman, primal release therapy, that kind of stuff, where we're really getting into the cathartic release of, letting go of decades of suppressed emotion and learning how to connect to our feelings. Even in, compassionate communication dialogue, NVC, we're talking about I feel, right?
Yeah.
And I feel is different than you made me, right? Or
Exactly.
did this, right? So when I say I feel, I take personal responsibility for my experience without blaming you or shaming you or name calling or doing anything that might feel like an attack, right? And so that happens a lot in relationships, and that creates a lot of conflict.
By the way, really quickly for everyone, when Sabrina said NVC, she meant Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. This is the book. So I highly recommend. And by the way, there's a link below to get a copy of all the books I recommend on my channel. So NVC, or it should have been titled Compassionate Communication. Like, that's what it should have been titled, but no one would buy it probably.
That's how I refer to it in my programs and the curriculums that we create, especially the mindfulness stuff for kids.
So coming back to what I was sharing before, though, I feel as though my capacity to be a better communicator came from the recognition of identifying at the core what causes my negative patterns, my limiting beliefs, my frozenness, if you will, from an emotional perspective. It was that work that put me on a trajectory. From my perception, and I'd like your take on this, so few people actually do inner work so they can actually be good communicators in a relationship. Does that feel true to you, for you?
Yeah, I of course it's true. I think that most people won't do what's required until it becomes obvious that something is required, right? And so usually it takes a pain or a bottom or a breakup or a divorce or a bankruptcy or some kind of major event in our lives where we realize, like, okay, something has to give. Like, there's something for me to really work on and heal within myself. It takes awareness and it takes willingness, right? And so when we have, I work with a lot of couples, in my programs, and when we have conflict in a relationship, usually two people come and they love each other. They just don't know how to get along, and they don't know how to communicate their feelings and advocate for their needs. They've learned to go into the same patterns that they learned in their childhood. They're behaving like their mother did or like their father did, or a combination of the two, expecting to get their needs met, hoping to get their needs met, but not actually taking responsibility for what their needs are, and asking, in ways that are an invitation, versus a demand or an imposition on another person, right? And so I think nobody gets a pass from doing inner child work. If we
Yeah.
want to live as conscious, free, peaceful, self-responsible, self-actualized human beings, we
Yeah.
have to go there. You have to do the inner child work to really understand, what your needs are, learn to meet them for yourself, and then learn to advocate for them in partnership. And when we're in that place of really just, not, here's the thing, when we learn what our needs are, then it becomes impossible to settle for less than that, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the important step, especially in your work, as you're coaching a lot of people with in terms of manifesting partnership and dating and relationships and so on.
Yeah.
Like, once you learn what your needs are, then it becomes, okay, then this is what I'm attracting, right? Why would you dismiss a need that has, revealed itself as significant, right? And so now we start to attract people that are, more capable or willing to meet us at that level,
Yeah.
because
Well, it's, oh, I want to jump in. So it's interesting because I think I've been on this journey for the last decade and a half. It started, I revisited the movie The Secret, kind of got me back on
yeah,
my path. I actually started my path when I was in my 20s, got derailed. Well, I'm sharing this with you. I've done Hoffman, I've done Insight, I've done all this work.
yeah,
And then now I'm in a relationship with someone. And many people here on the channel see that I record videos with Marie. And it's interesting now that in relationship, I thought, oh, I found the perfect partner. This is going to be, happily ever after. And then boom, about a year into it, I realized some of our childhood patterning is rearing its, for lack of a better word, ugly head.
of
And
course.
all of a sudden, I am faced with that little kid inside of me that didn't feel loved by their mother, that felt stonewalled by their mother.
Yeah.
And I recognize my partner isn't doing anything intentional. But there's this, now I'm faced with having to address this wound at a deeper level, at a real core level to some degree. Okay, now I've set the
A
stage.
wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, and so why I'm bringing this up is, isn't it fascinating that the work really takes a whole nother level when you're in relationship with someone?
100%. We can all be Buddha, when we're single, right? And it's easy to be enlightened and Zen and peaceful when you're living by yourself and there's no one there to, interrupt your flow or to challenge you on certain things or, to trigger us, right?
Yeah,
Relationships are containers for growth and expansion. It's
yeah,
really important that we create this context. And I hope that, that your listeners resonate with that, because I know that the idea is to find someone you can live with and be with, forever and live happily ever after with. And, the attachment to that level of, security or stability, really comes from unmet needs in childhood,
yeah,
and the idea that, I am going to have someone who's going to love me forever and never leave me type of thing. Right. So I invite everyone to examine, why it is that they want partnership and what it is that partnership represents for them, so we can get clear on what we're creating and why. And also, recognizing that, our just this idea of learning how to meet our own needs and learning how to show up in a partnership with this context in place allows us to really grow. It allows us to use our partnerships as as I mentioned earlier, containers, right? Like,
yeah,
this partnership is going to trigger me. It's going to bring up all of my stuff, and it's normal that we know this going in. It's going to bring up all of my childhood stuff because we become attached and we become
yeah,
vulnerable and we become exposed, and we get naked, right, for lack of a better expression,
yeah,
with our partners fully, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and so we feel very vulnerable, right? And so
yeah,
this will bring up all of the vulnerability of the child, right? All of that same vulnerability we experienced as
yeah,
children, and it can bring us back to innocence too, right? Which is a really
yeah,
beautiful thing if we can look at all of our triggers and say, this is what's showing up for me. This is how I feel, without making the other person responsible. This is so important that we understand that our partners are not causing us pain. They're just their behavior has instigated a pain cycle that we must now work through, that's been in our energy field, that's been in our patterning for most of our lives. It's just now showing up, right?
Yeah. So I recognize it's taken me a long time to really come to this realization, is that triggers are for me an opportunity to love myself. It's really an opportunity to grow and learn. And to the extent that I'm such an advocate for partnership in my professional capacity, and merely in this context of is I think deeper healing happens when we're at least in some significant relationship with someone versus the casualness of relationships that we experience today. Whether a relationship goes the distance or not,
Yeah.
It's oftentimes it's the attachment to it going the distance that causes so much pain, rather than going, well, maybe, and I even consider this in my own relationship, if it doesn't go the distance, that's okay too, so long as we at least continually show up being our vulnerable, authentic, transparent selves, and whatever growth happens, great. And if it leads to, till your deathbed, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. I think here, at least here in the United States, we're so hung up on it has to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not real.
I love what you're sharing, because it's such an opportunity for us to shift our focus. If we take the focus off of the, happily ever after and that level, needing that sort of reassurance, as I mentioned earlier, and we put our focus onto how can I grow today? How can I learn from this relationship today? How can I, how is this relationship nourishing me? Whether it's through pain cycles, feeling triggered, or through joyful experience and, deeper intimacy and exchange. I think that when we look at our relationships as this is what I'm choosing for myself today and every day, at one day at a time, then we can, it's actually, I think if you focus on the one day at a time and the growth experience and the gifts of the relationship, be them pleasant or unpleasant, then there's actually a better chance of this evolving into something that can, last a long time. If you find someone that you can grow with and evolve with, then there's really no reason to abandon this relationship. People abandon relationships because they are not, they feel like they're not getting their needs met, or they don't know how to advocate for their needs, and they shut down, right?
Can you talk about one day at a time? I really want to learn what. Can you elaborate? Because that one did ding 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 for me. So can you elaborate on one day at a time?
Yeah, I think it's important to stay in the present moment. I think it's important. I think sometimes, obviously when there's children involved and families and so on, there's some element of planning, right? We want to be able to plan for the future. We want to be able to live into a vision for ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with holding an intention versus being attached to an outcome, right?
Yeah.
So I invite everybody to kind of like reframe that and hold an intention for perhaps, the vision you have for your family, your children, your partner, the idea that how you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, which is beautiful. And you can live into that vision one day at a time by learning to be fully present in the moment and just accepting each day as it comes. And just, allowing that, whatever the relationship is informing in you to, invite you into deeper experiences of self-love, deeper experiences of self-acceptance, and here's the thing, is that we can never promise another person that we're gonna, stay who we are. We can promise that we can stay committed to evolving, or stay committed to the truth, or stay committed to our practice, or whatever the foundation of the relationship is, and we're gonna grow, right? And so with enough wisdom and experience and being able to really understand, the kind of partner that we're looking for, we can, most likely attract someone that we can grow and evolve with. And that's what I recommend for everybody is, not to get attached to someone that you can spend the rest of your life with, but really to find a partner that you can grow and evolve with and be in that one day at a time space with, while holding the intention for the vision you have for your life.
Really quickly, and by the way, thank you for that. Not only for sharing with everyone, but it's something I need to hear on a regular basis as well. I just want to give props to Terry really quick for this $20 super sticker you purchase today. I really appreciate it. She says, Jonathan, wishing you the very best. I love all your content and you're looking so much happier. That glow you and Maria have together is beautiful. Love you and her both. Well, thank you, Terry. I really want to say thank you for the $20 super sticker. Folks, if you have a question for either Sabrina or myself right now, you guys know my rules, or not rules, but my format. If you have a question, write the word question in the chat box. And then post the question thereafter, or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Asley. He's my son who passed away 5 years ago. In his honor, we donate to like the Hoffman Process Insight Institute and Seeds of Love, which is an organization in Colombia, which helps children who have been abandoned by their parents because they have a terminal disease or terminal illness. And so all the monies that collected are going to one of those three organizations. So again, if you use the little $sign, if you're watching the replay, hit that super thanks button because that helps as well. So again, I want to let everyone know if you have a question for either Sabrina and I, we're just going to keep going. And when you pop it in there, we'll pop it into the screen. Okay. So Sabrina, I've kind of came to the realization some years ago after Connor passed away that the number one emotional health wound most everyone is faced with is, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable. And dating triggers that like nobody's business, by the way.
Don't forget I'm not worthy, right?
Yeah, in that same context. So where does that, does that comes from the childhood, is that right?
Yeah, of course, 100%.
Yeah.
You know,
by the way, we have a question. So finish that thought, and then I'm going to post the question.
Yeah, I think everybody is dealing with some level of worthiness. Some questioning their own worth based on what they received or what they didn't receive or whatever the messaging was in their early childhood. I mean, even those of us that had, loving parents and present parents that were, relatively present will still deal with some question of that, right? Some level of doubt in terms of what we're worth and what we can have. Right. So this is very common.
Okay. Hey, Tina just posted a question. Mm-hmm. I'm grieving over a toxic relationship that ended 1 year ago. I was doing okay until I saw him with his new girlfriend. How can I move? I'm assuming on. I left him. He's a narcissist. Can you tackle that one?
I sure can. First of all, I think I want to validate that this is very painful, right? It's a painful experience, first of all, to be in this grieving state and, just kind of letting go of a relationship, and then to be, encounter this person in a new relationship can trigger all kinds of feelings of unworthiness or doubt, or, can instigate an even greater pain cycle. So I want to validate that this is a very painful experience for Tina. I also, I also think that we need to embrace the fact that when relationships, come to an end, that there is a gift in that. Right. And so if this relationship was a healthier one, or one that was good for Tina, then she would probably still be in it. Right. And so, she's out of this relationship. And, now here, Tina, there's an opportunity for you to really take a look at what your needs are and how much of your needs were not being met in this relationship, and learn to heal and presence yourself in that, in your own process of, developing self-worth and self-love and self-esteem. And I think that once you do that work, you'll come to the realization that you're much better off without this relationship, and being in a healthier state yourself, might find that you're not attracted to people like this anymore. It's easy to say someone is a narcissist, again, my relationship to judgments and diagnosis, this is life alienating language, right? As Marshall Rosenberg says. I think it's more empowering to say, I wasn't able to get my needs met in this relationship. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel acknowledged, or I didn't feel met, right? I didn't feel like there was room for me in this relationship. I've had a similar experience in my own past, right? Of just feeling like there was no room for me. And so, and the relationship felt very toxic. So, being able to remove yourself from a toxic relationship takes a lot of courage. So I really acknowledge Tina for the courage it took to leave and to stay out. And now here's an opportunity to rebuild. It's very important when we come out of relationships that are highly toxic, that we rebuild our self-esteem and our relationship to our own selves, and practice acceptance. I mean, people move on, right? And that does not a measure of how much we're worth or how lovable we are. It just means that he's doing what he's doing, and Tina needs to be doing what she's doing.
You said something that reminded me of something you said earlier. Whenever by continually saying I'm an avoidant, right, which I just did right now, but I said that. Yeah. Whenever, I think the same holds true when we're pointing the finger, and I don't even like that terminology, but when we identify that our previous partner was a narcissist, and then oftentimes that can be a misdiagnosed, it reinforces that in your consciousness. Right. So it's almost, it can give you, to some people, it gives them a badge of honor to some degree, or allows them.
It feeds the victim, right?
Exactly. It feeds the victimness.
I was victimized, he was a narcissist, she was a whatever, he was a this, he was a that. Yeah. Like, this is now, I feed my own victim energy. And I feel wronged and somewhat justified in my pain, right?
Exactly.
And when we describe this kind of pain to other people, there's never a shortage of humans that are ready to rally around this kind of resentment and anger, because so many of us have unmet needs. And so we can relate, right? We can relate to this and we go, yeah, he was a narcissist and you're so much better off, and all that stuff. And the fact of the matter is that, the relationship is over, and because you didn't get your needs met. That's why the relationship is over. That's the only reason to ever end a relationship, is because we're not getting our needs met. And when people don't get their needs met and they don't know how to advocate for their needs responsibly, they will start to shut down. Their hearts will close. They will look for other relationships. They will do things. They will behave in ways that are, that lack integrity, for, just to keep it general. And because they're trying to get a need met.
Yeah.
Right. That's all human behavior is an attempt to meet a need.
Yeah, and sadly, and this is going to sound like a judgment. I don't mean it this way per se. But there's, to some degree, there's almost a. I always say people are suckling on the nipple of victimhood. So, and I'm grateful that you drew attention to this. It's not a popular thing that you just said. To the extent people don't appreciate hearing that. You've got a blind spot here in your life. One in particular is that you're feeding the narrative of the narcissist, if you will, and you'll get lots of people that validate that. But really, if you want to make change, and I'm saying this to everyone watching, if you want to make change, it requires rolling up your sleeves, really diving deep. And one of the first things to do is say, I've been responsible for all of my experiences, and I have an opportunity to heal. And then it's going to require some work. And you can't just do, sit in the meditation and do Om and think it's all going to be cleared, or doing a 1 week Hoffman and think it's going to be cleared. It's a daily practice. Absolutely. Something that you harp on me regularly about that. Yeah. And I mean that in a good way.
I hope my heart is gentle. So here's what I want to say too, based on what you just said, Jonathan. It's very important that people don't take this information and punish themselves. Like, we don't want Tina to walk away and say, I'm responsible for my toxic relationship. I mean, yes, there is an element of personal responsibility, but let's not confuse responsibility with fault. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
It's important we understand that what happened to us in our childhood is not our fault. Our patterning is not our fault, right? Yeah. But we are, as adults, it's our responsibility to become aware of what those patterns are and to make the necessary internal adjustments, so that we can start attracting different types of partnerships by being different people, by being healthier people, right? So, why would someone stay in a relationship that's toxic, right? They would, we stay because it feels normal, right?
It's familiar to us, right? The Marvel Hendrix work.
When you look at the subconscious mind, as I talked about in the beginning, we look at our early childhood conditioning, that relationship and all of its misgivings and all the needs that were not being met feels like familiar territory based on the way
Yeah.
we were raised, right? And so once we change the subconscious programming and we shift and we change what feels familiar, we become attracted to different people. We're no longer attracted to people who are avoidant or people who are anxious or whatever the label is. We are attracted to people who can actually meet us in healthy connection and healthy love, right?
Hey, by the way, we got another question from Gigi.
Hi, Gigi.
If a man and woman have chemistry and compatibility, both are emotionally mature, can they commit to grow and evolve together? And that's enough, regardless of what society or your coach may say.
I mean,
I think,
yes.
yeah.
Have chemistry. First of all, if you have chemistry, that's God, right? So
Yeah.
compatibility you can build, and communication you can develop. A chemistry is either there or it's not. It's not something you can sort of fake, right? Or forge. I think that when there's chemistry, that's a beautiful indication that there's a good potential for partnership and for growth and expansion.
Yeah.
My experience, when we're really, really drawn to someone, it's usually because this relationship has a lot in store for us in terms of developing our potential, healing, growing, and expanding into the fullest versions of ourselves. Because let's not kid ourselves, that's what we want. At the end of the day, that's what everybody wants. We want to feel fulfilled. We want to feel content. We want to embody love, right? And we put our focus on partnership as this is going to help me embody love. This person is going to help me embody love. And yet the partnership is just basically mirroring back all the areas where we can embody love for ourselves, right?
Well, let's talk about, oh, I'm sorry. I was going to talk about chemistry for a second. Do you mind touching upon your thoughts on this? And let me share where I'm going with this. I think when two people meet, for the first time and they have this strong sexual desire for one another, we label that as chemistry, when it could just simply be lust or limerence. I think I'd like to think chemistry is something different. I'd like to almost think that it's an energetic experience versus a physical, visceral experience.
I think it's always an energetic experience. And
okay.
Make it a physical one. We can, focus on expressing it physically, but it's always an energetic experience. When we feel drawn to someone, it's energy. We're either actually energetically drawn to people or energetically repulsed by people. It's always one or the other, right? There's never just a stagnant point, because we're energetic beings. Just like, your cells will expand when they feel something really good, and they will contract when they feel something that doesn't feel good, right? So go ahead.
Oh, well, I have another thought. You just sparked. So we can have an energetic connection with someone, and at the same time, we may not be attracted to them from a, say, physical perspective. Is that the ego getting in our way? I'm just curious, and not to, I want to belabor that the ego is bad, but
I think attraction is normal, as I mentioned. Energetically, when you feel drawn to someone, that's attraction. And then it's us as human beings to decide, am I gonna play this out sexually? Am I gonna play this out in this way? How is this gonna play out? Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, no, it does make sense. I think sometimes there is this focus on the physical or sexual piece and not really an understanding that there could be an energetic piece. Like I think with Marie and I, we're really comfortable together, which I think is its own form of energetic connection. We have ability to really be vulnerable, authentic, and transparent with one another, which I feel like is energetic connection. It's energetic chemistry. It's not based on the desire to have sex as much as it is that we feel really comfortable with each other. Am I making sense there?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. And I will just repeat what I said earlier. I think it's all energetic connection. And
okay.
Of like what that energetic connection will inspire in you. You can have an energetic connection with a client, for example, that you feel, an affinity with, and friendship and love and respect for, and it doesn't spark, a sexual aspect, it doesn't really spark sexual desire. Makes sense? So there's other components that go into play when we talk about, being sexually attracted to somebody, right?
Yeah.
And, it's very normal to be, attracted to someone who embodies love and to want to turn that into something sexual. I think that happens a lot in relationships, especially opposite sex relationships, whether it's friendships and so on, where there is a love or respect or affinity. And then, the mind just automatically goes there, or we just automatically go there because that's how we're conditioned as well in our society to express love, right?
Yeah.
I want to, I want to make this sexual, right? Or I want to turn this into a sexual thing. And so it gets a bit more intricate when you start to look at like what creates sexual attraction between men and women, but it's really important to see that it's all energetic.
Got it. Okay. We have another question from Linda.
Hi, Linda.
After you get so old, don't we sort of settle? It becomes too much trouble to uproot and make changes. So we just put up with toxicity.
This makes me very sad.
Yeah.
Linda,
yeah.
No, Linda, no. At what point does it matter? It always matters. It's really up to you to be willing to do the work, Linda. I don't think you ever need to settle. And I think that, I think we settle because, as, Linda's saying, like what I'm really hearing is a lot of tiredness and exhaustion and just kind of, resignation around believing or hoping that a relationship can actually support her in getting her needs met,
Yeah.
And what I want Linda to know is that it's always possible to get your needs met. The first step in making that happen is just understanding what they are, and then advocating for them. These are very basic steps, right? When I understand what my needs are, and then advocating for them becomes a whole other body of work, because we have to deal with our self-worth. We have to deal with finding our voice. We have to deal with developing the courage to ask, being willing to receive. This is where all the inner child work comes in. But this can be done at any stage of life, and it doesn't need to take years and years and years. As you know, I do a 3-month process, with people to help them go through their inner child, understanding their subconscious programming and healing some of their limiting beliefs. It doesn't need to take a really long time to understand, how we operate, what our needs are, and how to create a healthy relationship with ourselves. That would always be the first place I start.
Actually, even though I want to continue this conversation, but really quickly, everybody, you can see in the box there, I put down Sabrina's website. She's got some amazing programs. As I said in the beginning of this broadcast, Sabrina's my coach. I work with her twice a month. I work on some of my childhood wounds and traumas, as well as just finding a way to learn to regulate my emotions. I think being aware of your emotions is kind of like it's a blessing and a curse, right? But the blessing being, I'd rather be aware of my emotions than suppressing my emotions. Yeah. And so when things come up, I come to Sabrina. So folks, in the chat box or in the box, there is a way to get a hold of Sabrina, and I'll put the link below in the description as well. Yeah. So to keep up on this conversation, I know someone else posted a question. Well, I'm going to bring up something negative that was brought up, Sabrina. Kimberly believes that you were doing some victim blaming when we were talking about this earlier. Can you address this? Because she's made a couple comments here.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the comment, and I don't want to blame anyone. That's what the victim does, right? So yeah. There's no victim blaming. It's just a matter of being aware of whether or not we're taking full responsibility for what we're co-creating. It's really important that we wrap our heads around this and understand that whenever something is not going our way, or we're not getting our needs met, or we're feeling hurt or dismissed in a relationship, or we break up with someone, and whatever the pain is, it is a co-creation. And that co-creation, as painful as it feels, is actually there to serve your highest and best good. It's there to serve our learning, right? It's an opportunity for growth and expansion. And so, I think it's important that when we stay in victim, it's really important to know this. When we stay in victim, it's not possible to grow. Because the victim.
And we're talking about victim consciousness. Different. Right. Yeah, Dr. Pat Allen says, unless you have to call a policeman, a doctor, or an attorney, Okay.
Yeah.
If you have valid reasons to calling any one of those
Yeah.
three people, if you will, then yes, then you should be, advocating through, these
100%.
resources. At the
100%.
same time, if we're in a victim mentality,
Yeah.
that's only going to perpetuate more pain. And
Yeah.
I'm not an advocate for, initiating, a self crucifixion
Yeah.
by being in a state of victim consciousness. And that's
Well,
my opinion on that, Kimberly.
yeah, and that's my opinion too. I think, I think it's natural to feel victimized, and
Yeah.
all feelings are valid. Okay, so let's just
Yeah.
say that all feelings are valid, and we have to also learn to work with these emotions if we're going to grow. Because if we stay in the, bitterness and resentment and the justification of, our pain, then we can never actually heal. It's not
Yeah.
possible.
And again, let's be clear. We're not talking about those cases where you have to call a doctor, a lawyer, or a
No.
policeman. Those, we are not even remotely talking about that. We're talking about consciousness outside of that. So I noticed another comment that came in. Bear with me one second, Sabrina. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe I can't find it. Okay. So, well, let's kind of put a bow on all this. So, if there is such a thing.
Listen, I think relationship talk is difficult because,
Yeah.
there is a little wounded child in each of us,
Yeah.
that just wants what they want. They want someone to come along and make it better, right? But we want that situation to show up and have it meet all of our longings, all of our fantasies, all of our, everything that we've wished for, whether it was, induced by Hollywood or, other examples that we've seen and so on. So it's really important that we sort of graduate it and develop maturity around this idea of what partnership is and what
Yeah.
partnership really represents. And again, my opinion on this is that partnership represents an opportunity to grow, to
Yeah.
look at ourselves. And it's going to show us the parts that we don't like. It's going to show us the parts that we love, the parts that we want to see more of. And it's just a matter of how willing we are to embrace all of it, with a spirit of gratitude and a willingness to embrace those lessons so that we can develop ourselves as individuals, right?
So, and by the way, I fully agree. And I do recognize that partnerships also have some transactional aspects to it. And what I mean to say is you might be sharing rent with one another or a mortgage with one another. There might be some duties that are part of this thing we call partnership. I do believe, though, that ultimately inner peace is if when we make our partner responsible for our own happiness, we're really missing the boat. and by the way, it's taken me 50 plus years to figure this out, because we're not taught, even as young children, how to be in a good relationship. We're rarely modeled what a good relationship looks like. And there's rarely ever real discussion on how to be in a good partnership, let alone recognizing that our childhood wounds cause us to be conflicted in our relationships. So I know I said a lot of words to draw attention to both inner healing, and recognizing that relationships are a great container to do more work. And I say this from personal experience right now in my life.
I also think it's important for people to know, if you're ever in a situation where you just know that you cannot get your needs met, whether it's an abusive situation or a highly toxic environment or a dangerous situation. If ever, I want to say this for people that are listening, if you're ever in some kind of physical danger or that kind of thing, this is not an opportunity to stay and do the work. It's not an opportunity. This is where you need to sort of stand up and go, I need to exit this situation for my own safety. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very important to draw that distinction too, because, we can be in a partnership with someone where we're relatively safe, we're physically safe, we're not in any kind of real danger. And, these triggers will come up, and we can either embrace them, or we can decide, I don't want to look at myself and I don't want to do the work. I'm going to exit this relationship and go create it in the next one, and the one after that. And then because our imprints that we learned in
Yeah.
childhood, and all the values that we've inherited and our beliefs about ourselves and how we operate in relationship is something we take with us from one container to the next container and to the next container, until we stop and say, okay, how do I want to show up? What are my needs, and how can I heal, so that I can be in loving and lasting partnership, and that's something that is really important to check in with ourselves as we create partnership.
Well, it occurs to me that something sorely lacking today in the dating, mating, and relating realm is commitment. And I'm going to go down a different rabbit hole for a moment. A commitment to grow together, even if you're not meant to grow together, a commitment to actually work on a relationship instead of just experiencing the person. Really a commitment to saying, okay, why are we in this relationship? Okay, from a transactional perspective, look at it from that perspective and say, why are we in this relationship? And then there's an invitation, at least through our conversation, is, and how can we grow as individuals in this container? So, and I think so few couples have these kind of conversations. I think women in particular are fearful for having this conversation, when I'm an advocate to, talk about this like on the very first date practically. And I don't mean that, literally, but I'm saying very, very early on, having these conversations, rather than, I think a lot of humans bury their head in the sand, having deeper, intimate conversations.
You know how it is when what I think, in sort of, in everyday consciousness, so many of us are afraid of exposure, or afraid of making ourselves vulnerable, that we want to represent ourselves, well, and we want to maintain this image of whatever we feel, however it is that we feel we want to be seen by others. And oftentimes when we come to inner work, we see that how we see ourselves is not how we experience ourselves, right? And that is what creates all the neuroses, right? It's what creates all the dysfunction in our lives, not just in our partnerships. So I think it's really important to be able to just, get honest about who we are and where we are, and, how we feel and how we operate, even that level of vulnerability, when we're talking about partnership, creating transparency, like being able to say to your partner, like, I feel scared, or I'm feeling insecure, or I'm feeling, those things. Like, it takes courage to share that level of transparency in a partnership. And that's the stuff that creates real intimacy.
Yeah. In my book here, I got to give a plug for it. What the heck is self-love anyway? Journey of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. Chapter 1 is called Speak Your Truth, Do It with Kindness. It's NVC.
Yeah.
Chapter 9 says, when it's sincere and from the heart, we really can't say the wrong thing to the right person. Right. When you're speaking from your heart, and the person can't receive it, or they're incapable or unwilling, whatever it is, then they're not the right person for you. But you shouldn't avoid speaking from the heart because you're afraid someone will leave you. That's actually your way to build a stronger relationship, is speak from your heart. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Okay.
It just echoes what I just said, that level of transparency, of being willing to be vulnerable and share yourself. I mean, if the person that you're with can't hold space for your true feelings, then what a wonderful indication that you can't get your needs met in this relationship. And therefore, there's no need to keep trying. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. I'm pretty sure I said it before in this conversation, but the only reason to ever leave a relationship is if you're not getting your needs met. And there is no possibility of getting your needs met. We got to do the work to advocate for our needs and ask. And if we constantly ask and we're not met, then, we're responsible, right, for our own fulfillment and satisfaction. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think this would be a great place to break from our conversation today. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. Wait, someone just made a comment, Retro Girl. Sabrina, I commend you for doing this type of coaching. I agree that triggers result in a blame game. Working through our triggers by looking inward helps one heal, and I don't want to be a victim. Way to go, retro girl. So, all right. So one more time, share everybody where they can get a hold of you or get in touch with you. And if you have any programs or anything coming up, please share that.
Okay, so my website is intuitivesabrina.com. You can go to my offerings page. There's lots of programs and offerings there. Everyone is welcome to book a free 30-minute consultation. I do a free call and where there's an intuitive reading, and we kind of go into where you might be blocked and holding fear and pain in your life. I have a free 7-day meditation support class coming up for those of you that are interested in having a meditation practice, whether you're new or experienced. It's a class for everyone, and you can register for that on my website as well.
All right. Well, I'm really excited to have you on today. I end my videos the way I do, always the same. Can I just reach in and give you a big, gigantic Jonathan Bear hug?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Wait, do I get it? Wait, do I get a hug back?
Yes, I'm hugging you back.
Okay. Well, Sabrina, big hugs and many thanks for everyone. I want to thank Roller Girl or Retro Girl and Tina and Natalie and Leafs and Catherine and our Facebook group, Linda in Minnesota and Gigi and Tasha and Tina and everyone that commented. And again, big props to Terry for your $20 super sticker. Thanks so much, everyone. Wishing you a super duper wonderful fab day. Be well. Thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye.